Just a quick preamble. The day this is scheduled to come out, that's my birthday. If this is your first time listening, don't worry about it. If you're a regular listener and you're like, hey, the guy's pretty cool, I'd like to get him something for his birthday. There is a Venmo link in the show notes. You want to drop a couple dollars for gunpowder or gasoline, two of my major or any number of other things, maybe a fancy city cup of coffee. I'd appreciate it. So if you're interested, listen to this when it comes out, March 25th. That is my birthday. And again, if you want to send something, Venmo some money, hey, you shall not muzzle the ox while it treads out the grain. I appreciate you. What's up, gunfighters? Grab your notepads and pens, probably write in the rain notepads if you are a true gunfighter, and pull up your desk, pull up your chair, come to the front of the class for this Gunfighter University lesson, philosophy on Magnums. I did a poll not long ago, and I had several different categories, and the one that did the best or tied with the best was philosophy. Last time I checked, philosophy in different areas of gunfighting. Today, more specifically, let's get philosophical on Magnums. When are they a good choice? When are they a bad choice? When is the proper time to use Magnums and not to use Magnums? To Magnum or not to Magnum? That is the question. Welcome to Gunfighter Life, the podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, the right way with Almighty God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. I'm going to throw in the bio because if I'm going to talk to you about philosophy on gunfighting and hunting and things like that, you should probably establish some credibility with the audience, right? Because why should you listen to me? Do I just have some channel? Do I just have a bunch of money to throw out to get listeners? Do I take bribes from gun companies to push products on you? Like, why should you listen to me? By the way, no sponsors here. No corporate sponsors, no gun company sponsors. Supported by Almighty God and the patrons. Thank you, patrons. I'm going to throw in the bio. If you want to skip around 2 minutes, and we'll get into the meat and potatoes of Magnum philosophy. I'll roll into a quick abbreviated bio and then into the main topic. First and foremost, I am a Christian. I don't apologize for that. God is number one in my life. I grew up hunting and fishing in the backwoods of the southeastern United States at a very early age. Some of my earliest memories are with firearms. I joined the Marine Corps at 17, did a couple of combat tours in Iraq. By God's grace, He got me through that safely. After that, I served as a instructor, an urban warfare instructor and a desert warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps. I also served with the LAPD, both full-time as a sworn police officer and some more specialized assignments, as well as serving in the U.S. Army, full-time and part-time National Guard. I've been a FBI firearms instructor, still am an FBI firearms instructor, have been for a lot of years, also NRA certified and some other three-letter government agency certified. I've been a private contractor for a three-letter government agency I won't specify. I've been the commander of a tactical team in a large metropolitan area. By God's grace, He got me through all that in one piece, not because I'm better, but because He chose to have grace and mercy on me. I've been a professional hunter and guide. Professionally hunted things like buffalo and elk. Not many people today can say they've done that, but I'm blessed to be able to say that I have. I've hunted everything from white-tailed deer on the East Coast to mule deer on the West Coast to gray squirrel on the East Coast to prairie dog on the West Coast and elk and bear and wolf and slain all manner of beast. A state rifle and pistol champion a few times over in a few different disciplines. Now those experiences, it's not because I'm bigger or badder. Certainly not bigger. In fact, I met one of the patrons in real life, and he said something to the effect of, "I thought you'd be bigger." Reminded me of that William Wallace movie, where he's like, "Oh yeah, if William Wallace were here, he'd shoot lightning bolts out of his rear end." Well, I'm not William Wallace, but I am the person that did all those things in the bio. But not because I'm bigger or badder. I don't think that I survived when many other young, good men did not. I give all the glory and all the credit to God, all the talents and experiences that He's given me and the things that He's let me live through. I hope to use them to glorify God and to help you today. So if I boast in anything, it's not in my strength. It's in that God had mercy on me and saved me because He had a purpose for me. And hopefully I can use those talents, skills, and abilities to serve you today. Now let's talk about Magnums. Before I get into good and bad use of Magnums, I guess I should define what Magnum is. And I'm going to define Magnum something more powerful, either in velocity or in mass of projectile, than the standard baseline for that kind of bore diameter. For instance, probably the first example I'm going to talk about, but we'll use it to establish what a Magnum is, 38 Special. 38 Special is the standard. 38, now this may be confusing, but 38 and 357 Magnum are the same bore diameter. One came from a holdover in old cap and ball days. Measured cartridges differently, but a 38 Special is actually .357 in diameter. Just like a 357 Magnum. They took the 38 Special case, they lengthened it slightly so you wouldn't put it in the wrong gun and blow it up, and they loaded it hotter. Basically, they made a longer case, put more powder in it, loaded it to a higher pressure, and then you get the Magnum, the 357 Magnum. Another real easy one, the 44 Special, same thing. They did the 44 Special, was around for a while. There was other 44 calibers that were pretty standard. One may have been slightly more powerful than the other, 44 Russian, 44 Special, 44 Henry Rimfire, things like that, but they were all pretty vanilla. And then you get into Elmer Keefe and hot rodding 44 Specials and really kind of pushing the envelope on there, maybe blowing up a gun, and then coming up with the 44 Magnum. The 44 Magnum is quite a bit spicier than the standard 44 calibers, muy caliente. That's what I mean when I say Magnum. If you look at, let's say, the standard 30 calibers, and as America, we love 30 cals here, baby. Cheeseburgers, French fries, apple pie, and 30 cals, putting holes in stuff. So you talk about your kind of standard, and there are many, right? But let's talk about your standard 30 calibers. 308, 30-06, good standard calibers. Magnums, 300 Win Mag. It's probably the most known, right? 300 Win Mag is the Magnum of a 30 cal. There are many others. 300 Remington Ultra Magnum. That being said, not all Magnums have the name Magnum in the title. Magnum, for a little bit of history, if you don't know, from what I understand, I wasn't drinking champagne back in the turn of the century, but from what I understand, a normal champagne bottle, when you got a larger version of a champagne bottle, it was called a Magnum. It was a bigger bottle than a normal champagne bottle. And when you looked at these early cartridges, these bottlenecked cartridges, it kind of looked like a bottle, and they were bigger than a standard cartridge. Somebody called it a Magnum, and it stuck. Whether they did that on purpose or people just started calling them Magnums, and a gun company, cartridge company was like, let's call it a Magnum. To my knowledge, the 375 H&H was the first Magnum. But I digress. There's a little bit of history there. But not all Magnums have to be called a Magnum to actually fit my definition of a Magnum. We go to the standard. Let's look at 7mm. What I would call the standard for that is going to be the OG 7x57 Mauser, kind of the Americanized version of that, the 7mm Aud 8, maybe the 280 Remington. Those are pretty standard 7mm, and some are more powerful than others, but they're what I would call standard 7mm calibers. The 7mm Remington Magnum is a Magnum, but also the 7mm PRC is absolutely a Magnum, even though Magnum is nowhere in the title. I'm not going to go through them all, but just a Magnum for me is something that's spicier, and that's a scientific term. Not really, but it has more velocity, more power, more powder capacity, more bullet mass. In some way, more newtons, if you want to measure it that way, more foot-pound potential than the standard bore diameter and comparable cartridges. That's a Magnum. Okay, I don't want you to think that it has to have Magnum in the title. Long kind of definition. Let's get into Magnum philosophy finally. A long preamble, I know, but I think it's important. Like in any kind of debate, you should define the terms. Term defined, let's get into some philosophy. When to Magnum. Here's where I think the proper use of Magnum. You are already proficient in the standard bore diameter in that platform. For instance, you're carrying a snub-nose revolver. Standard 5-shot, 38 357 bore diameter. You should be, and that's an expert's gun. I don't care how many people recommend it to a new shooter or a woman, that's a bad choice. In my opinion, in my philosophy, bad choice. Not the revolvers are, but that particular, a snub-nose revolver is kind of an expert's gun to shoot well. If you're going to put a 357 Magnum in it, and this comes from somebody that has a 357 Magnum that I carry regularly. It's perhaps one of the harshest, most punishing recoiling handguns on the planet. And I've shot plenty of big handguns. But I've got a super lightweight Scandium snub-nose 357 Magnum revolver. I would not advise anybody to carry that gun in 357 Magnum or any snub-nose 357 Magnum until one is already very proficient with 38 Special. You had better be proficient and be able to control that revolver because there's still quite a bit of recoil because the guns are so light in a snub-nose revolver. You had better be able to control recoil and get multiple hits on target and shoot well a snub-nose and 38 Special before you ever even think about dropping a 357 Magnum in there. Right, so that's a pretty clear, because you can do it in this exact same gun, right? So that's a pretty clear option there. One that's not called a Magnum, but absolutely is a Magnum, but it's another easy comparison, the 357 SIG, which was kind of called upon. You could argue whether it does or not. In some loads it gets pretty close, in some loads it's not even close. But 357 SIG is not actually 0.357 in diameter to confuse. It's actually 9mm, which is 0.355 diameter, which is pretty close. I guess they decided that 357 SIG was a better name than Spicy 9. Although Spicy 9 is a pretty cool name too. But 357 SIG, if you look at it, it's for more or less, and you might consider it either a 10mm or a 40 cal necked down to 9mm, so a bottleneck pistol cartridge. It is hotter than standard 9mm. Right? I would never advise somebody carry 357 SIG in, let's say, a fighting-sized semi-automatic handgun if they were not already proficient in 9mm. That is a bad idea. Get proficient in the 9mm before you step up to 357 SIG. One, it costs money to be proficient. You got to buy ammo, you got to shoot, and 357 SIG is not cheap, and it's not the easiest round to reload for. So you should be proficient before you ever step up to 357 SIG. Do I like 357 SIG? Yeah, I do, and I'll come back to that later when you might want to go to it. But you had better be proficient in 9mm in a similar sized handgun before you even think about stepping up to 357 SIG. That is the proper use of that Magnum. When you are proficient, when you are good with a 9, when you are good with a 38 Special, then maybe consider the Magnum version. When moving into the rifle world, I mentioned I was a professional big game hunter and guy. I've been hunting since a youth, and I learned this lesson kind of the hard way, and I saw it in many other people an example, and this is anecdotal, but as a guide, some of the most commonly wounded game calibers, and we had everything on the ranch from exotic antelope and deer species, well, we had all the way down to, fox squirrels, which is a thing, yes. If you don't live in an area that has fox squirrels, that's a real thing. Had that all the way up to bison, right? Buffalo. And didn't really matter. The point is that I've seen a lot of game shot. Some of the most common woundings were with Magnums, and that's not because the Magnums are more effective. I have some theories. Going back to the right use of Magnums. I would never, ever, ever advise you to use a Magnum unless you are already good with the standard caliber. I would never advise you to get a 300 Win Mag if you are not good with the standard, let's say the just plain Jane vanilla 308 or a 30-06. If you're not good, if you can't run a bolt gun, if you can't take game with a 308, I do not advise you get a 300 Win Mag because you need to practice. And you're going to practice more with a 308. I don't even care if you have money that grows on trees. You just make it rain and have crates of 300 Win Mag delivered to your door. That's not most of us, but even if that's you, you're still going to practice more with 308 because you have a shoulder. You can go out and shoot, 50 rounds on a reasonably weighted 308 rifle in a training session. And shooting off a bench is not training for hunting unless you shoot deer off a corn feeder at 100 yards off a bench. That's not how I hunt. That's how you put meat on the table. I'm not putting you down, but that's not the kind of hunting I'm talking about. I'm talking about like spot and stalk and still hunting, tracking an animal, sneaking up on an animal, killing an animal, eating an animal. That's the kind of hunting I'm talking about. Not sitting in a stand, not shooting off a bench. Training for that is not shooting off a bench. That is sighting in your gun. That is making sure the platform functions and shoots point of aim, point of impact, which is absolutely important. Shooting the gun out of a lead sled off a bench should inspire no kind of confidence that you're proficient with that gun in the field. In order to be proficient, you should train in similar things in the field. Look at it this way. Marines are renowned for being riflemen. I'll say that because I was an expert rifleman in the Marine Corps. I think I can claim that. Expert riflemen in the Marine Corps who are known for producing good riflemen, right? Marines don't train off a bench. In fact, I don't think, unless it was a machine gun in Iraq, right, because I had it on a post, as far as like actual legit training for Marine Corps rifle training, you don't train off a bench. You don't shoot off a bench. Why? Because that's not how you fight. That's not training. You don't even zero your gun off a bench. You especially don't train off a bench. I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps. You know what I didn't do? You want to get ready for combat in the sandbox there, Marine? Here's a bench and a lead sled. Shoot me the tiniest group you can. Then you're ready for the Hajj. Then you're ready for radical Muslim extremists who want to cut your head off because they worship a false religion. Yeah, I said it. Don't come here for politically correct crap. Go be programmed by some mainstream media for that. But that's not what I did, right? When I was an urban warfare instructor for the Marine Corps, I was like, you want to get ready for combat? You get the best lead sled you can and shoot the tiniest group. You're going to be ready. No, because I'm not a liar. I actually wanted to get people ready for combat. That being said, you want to be ready for hunting in the field. Shooting off the bench is like, before, if you went to mainstream school and you took a test and you had like the bubble sheet, and before you actually filled out the test, I don't know if they still do SATs this way anymore, they may do it on a computer or something. Before you actually started an important test, they had like the practice bubbles to make sure your pencil worked, to make sure that you knew how to color in a freaking bubble. Those practice bubbles are the lead sled. The practice bubbles are the shooting off the bench. That is what you do to prep for actual testing yourself. Does that make sense? And to do that, you need to shoot some rounds. You can dry fire as well, and I really encourage dry fire, but you should shoot some rounds, and not off a bench. Standing, sitting, kneeling, prone, braced against a tree, maybe leaning around a tree. Practicing one really good shot at first, and then a really quick, fast working of that bolt and a follow-up shot as fast as you can. You should be proficient with that gun, and you should be taking game routinely with a standard caliber. If you're talking the lower 48 of animals you can legally hunt, there is nothing you can't take with a standard 30 cal. There's nothing you can't take with a proper load in 30-06. If you're not already proficient in taking game with a 30-06, I would not advise you to get a 300 Win Mag. I would not advise it. That is a wrong application. Again, in my view, and you're coming here for advice from my training and experience. My philosophy is be good with the standard caliber. Be good with the standard caliber first, and before you ever even consider getting a Magnum hunting rifle. Right? Before you ever consider putting a 357 mag in your snubby, you should be good with 38 Special. Now let's get into how people use this wrong. And then we'll get into how to use it right. How I see people use it wrong and how I think people use it wrong a lot is as a crutch. They are not confident shooters, they are not proficient shooters, they are not good shooters, and they think that more foot-pounds somehow is going to make them effective. Right? It's not. You miss with a 44 mag, may as well have been a 22 long rifle, right? And we see this if you study the Miami shootout, the Miami-Dade shootout, which was like kind of a major turning point. There was a bunch of FBI dudes, and I've said it before, cops are not gunfighters, especially FBI. FBI is what? The Federal Bureau of Gunfighters? Wait, that doesn't match the acronym. No, it's the Federal Bureau of Investigations. They're administrators. I've worked with FBI. I am an FBI certified handgun instructor. Right? FBI are not gunfighters. Some of them are, like some specialized units, that's their bread and butter, that's what they do. Those guys are gunfighters. The vast majority of FBI agents are investigators. They are clerks, they are administrators. They are right arms of the magistrate to document where you messed up and bring you before a judge. They have a gun like a fire extinguisher just in case. Not gunfighters. You look at the Miami-Dade shootout, there was two guys. I believe they either one or both were combat veterans. Look at the amount of rounds the FBI fired at that one suspect who killed a bunch of FBI agents. They fired a ton of rounds. Hit him once with a 9mm. Instead of blaming poor marksmanship and them not being able to hit with all the rounds they fired, and they fired a lot of rounds. I mean a lot. Now they were brave. I'll give it to them, especially the guys that kept fighting. They were brave. But if you look at the amount of rounds fired and the amount of hits, I would say the main issue there was marksmanship, not the 9mm. If you fire dozens of rounds and hit once, maybe don't blame the 9mm. But that's kind of what happened. They kind of blamed the 9mm and said, we hit this dude and it went through his arm and hit a bunch of other stuff and then failed to penetrate the heart by like a half an inch. So obviously the 9mm sucks. Let's go to something bigger. To me, the logical analysis of that shooting is, let's get guys to hit more, right? Instead of hitting them once, you hit them half a dozen times with several dozen rounds. Even that, I would consider, right? What's the rifleman's creed say? Again, I'm a Marine. It's the hits that count. It's not the noise that you make. It's not the rounds you fire. It's the hits that count. So, don't go to a bigger caliber because you can't shoot. Right? So, I see that. I think a lot of people who are not proficient, they are not confident in their abilities with tactics, with shooting, with the basic fundamentals of shooting. And they think, well, I suck. So, or maybe they don't consciously think this, they subconsciously know it. That I'm not very good, so let me just shoot a big honking round. Let me overcompensate with some big, more powerful round, and at least I'll feel good about myself. At least I'll be able to puff my chest on a forum somewhere, even though if you took me out to the range, I probably couldn't hit very much. Because people are using the Magnum as a crutch for their inability to shoot. And they're like, well, I got a Magnum. Doesn't matter where I hit them, it's a Magnum. Okay. Same thing with hunting. They don't really get out and practice. They don't maybe shoot at all except a lead sled or a bench. They shoot a couple of times a year. And they think, well, I'm not the best hunter, but if I use a 300 Win Mag, then, I just got to aim for the middle and I'll just blow them apart. And the guys around the campfire will recount epics about me and what a slayer of beasts I am. I've got the Magnum, it's going to be okay. Yeah, I think that's the wrong use of Magnum. Sorry to pee in your Cheerios. If that's you, just be circumspect and consider it. Right? And I say this because I'm going to dime myself out here. When I was a ballistic nerd even as a young kid. I loved shooting. I grew up shooting and hunting at a very early age. One of my first serious jobs, not like helping my family commercial fishing or, digging holes for money, like doing landscaping work, like yard work and stuff like that. But actual job was as a lifeguard. And one of the things when it was slow, raining, people weren't allowed in the pool, I would literally study ballistics charts. Back before the internet was, maybe it was a thing, but like mobile phones with internet wasn't a thing. Like it was the kind of internet. I would sit on my lifeguard chair and study ballistics tables. And I had it in my mind you, I grew up in the southeastern United States, where the biggest thing to hunt is white-tailed deer and black bear. And I had already taken a black bear probably by this point with a bow and arrow. But I got it in my mind that what I needed in the southeast United States was a 7mm Rem mag. It was a good rifle. It was a horrible choice, right? Because I looked at the ballistic charts. Oh, it's flat shooting. It's got all this energy because it looked good on paper. And honestly, I was a teenager as a lifeguard. I didn't really know any better. We all learn, right? I would die myself out. That was a stupid choice in caliber. Is 7mm Rem mag a bad choice? No. But it is superfluous for anything east of the Mississippi. And I live in the southeast United States. I don't know that I ever shot a deer past 100 yards. And I grew up putting food on the table. So why I thought I needed that, I don't know. Why I thought I needed a Magnum. But here's the thing. That was my first... I grew up hunting poor with a shotgun. A lot of times a single-shot shotgun. Or an old bolt-action shotgun. I thought I was slick when I saved up and got my first pump-action shotgun. Semi-auto and a semi-auto Remington 1100. This was my first centerfire rifle. I had no business. It was my money. I bought it. But it was a poor choice to dime myself out 7mm Rem mag for my first centerfire gun. What I should have got was a 308. Because I could have gotten ammo easily, readily available, and I would have shot it in practice with it a lot more. I wouldn't have shot it once or twice because the ammo was crazy expensive, and it honestly hurt to shoot as the biggest of teenage boys and shot it once or twice and be like, I'm good, I'm ready to go hunting. I would have been better, probably been better, honestly, with a 243. I've killed more elk with a 243 than with a 7 Rem mag. Because I like to shoot it in practice with it. And it's lightweight. But anyway, getting off that, I would have been much better served with a 243 or a 308 and a centerfire bottleneck cartridge. Heck, I would have been better served with a lever action 30-30 than a 7mm Rem mag. It was a fine rifle. Got stolen, but for another time. But it was a fine rifle. It was not a fine choice of caliber for me. And it's a fine caliber, but for me at that time, no. I wasn't proficient with a centerfire rifle, big bore centerfire rifle anyway. And keep in mind, I may have at this point, or right around this point, already been an Olympic gold medalist. Pretty precise rifle shooting Olympic gold medalist. I grew up also competition shooting. So I was decent with small rifles, but as far as like a bolt action hunting rifle, big bore, powerful rifle, I was not, and it was not a good choice for me. So I'm doing that too. If you kind of got slapped by my recommendation of improper use of philosophy of Magnums, realize I slapped myself too, because I did it. And going back to my time as a guide, where I saw a lot of, one of the cool things about being a professional big game hunter and guide, I got to do as much hunting in a year as some people do in a lifetime. Right? That was like what I did for a living, was track animals and kill animals and slay beasts and carve them up, butcher, be able to help people feed their family. That was a cool thing. Be able to teach people how to hunt. It was a great thing. But I got to see a lot of animals shot and wounded, and I saw no correlation with more dead animals with Magnums. In fact, I saw the exact opposite correlation of less. And I know that they're not less effective, so that leads me to believe that a lot of people were using Magnums incorrectly, which kind of led to the thought on this episode. If you're shaky and you don't practice with your rifle and you got buck fever, Magnum ain't gonna save you. It's not a crutch. Don't try and use it as a crutch. With that, let's move on to happier part of the conversation. When is the right use for Magnums? Because I think Magnums are not bad all the time. They're not Malum and say. They're not just carte blanche bad. They're a really good use of Magnums. When might that be? Well, let's go back to my carry gun, a snub-nose 357 Magnum, 360 PD if you care about the model. I most often carry it with 38 Special. I think cost-benefit analysis most of the time, 38 special is best. I can get more shots on target quickly with a 38 special. That said, I sometimes carry it in 357 Magnum. Let's go back to when I was a guide. If I'm dealing with an angry buffalo, right, and I'm not guiding right then. Part of my job is I was also ranch manager. I managed a large exotic game ranch. And it wasn't feasible when I'm, fixing, well, let's just say doing hydraulic engineering, getting water to move from one part of the ranch to the other part of the ranch, digging holes and things like that. Not exactly feasible for me to have a long gun. If I'm dealing with a ticked off buffalo because I'm on his turf, yeah, I want the 357 Magnum for that. I want hard cast 180 grain 357 Magnum. It's a real situation I've been in. Also, the more exotic antelope species, they get in rut. They just get ornery. I once saw an oryx fight an elk. I later found one of those two. I'm talking about a big bull elk and an oryx. You talk about a strange looking fight. And I later found one of them turn up dead. They fought to the death, I assume, right? Because there was no outside injury, so it's not like a coyote or anything killed the oryx. It's a big antelope species. But anyway, sometimes that happens right in front of you when you're guiding. And they don't care whether you're there or not. Again, if I'm doing other things and I don't have a rifle and I have to deal with an angry, if that oryx decides he's had enough of the elk and he's coming after me, right? 357 Magnum for that is good. Because it's such a big animal, and if it's that close, the getting back on target quickly is kind of a moot point because wherever that muzzle moves is probably still going to be on target. So for that, 357 Magnum. That's a point where I'm fairly decent with that 38 special. I've literally taken deer with it. Yes, that is legal in some places. Yeah, and with a snub nose, I'm talking. In fact, with that very gun. There are times when I think it is important to have 357 Magnum. Also, you may know I lived in Alaska, in coastal southeast Alaska rainforest, thick brown bear country. Now, even when I had a rifle on me, something can happen. I could be butchering an animal or something and be overtaken by a bear. At least I have the 357 Magnum on me. For that, 357 Magnum, again, hard cast, 180 grain or similar, non-expanding bullet. With that gun in my pocket, that's a good use for a 357 Magnum. Again, most of the time I carry it in 38 special, but there is a use for 357 Magnum. Let's talk about 357 SIG, because I like 357 SIG. I have successfully hunted with 357 SIG. Let's say, an example, let's say you're really good with a combat handgun, with a good combat handgun 9mm. But let's say you are doing something in the southeast United States with the border crisis, and maybe there's some heavy gang drug cartel activity in your area. You also work or manage a ranch or something, and you're out doing stuff where it's just not practical for you to have a rifle on you. You may have one close by, you may have one in the truck, but maybe you're somewhere you can't get to with the truck, down in a ravine, down in a wadi, and you're fixing a barbed wire fence or something. And you got both hands busy, you got whatever. Just, you get what I'm saying. Maybe it's a hard climb down and back up. And maybe you find yourself on the wrong end of a fairly long distance long gun handgun fight, meaning you have the handgun. 357 SIG is a good thing for that. You can get fairly decent capacity. You can get it, again, if you're already good with a 9, because if you're bad with a pistol, it's just going to enhance your ability to not shoot, which is not good. But it's got a flatter trajectory. You can gain some advantage. With proper ammo selection, it would be, I think, a decent choice against some barriers, like a vehicle. So let's say you're out literally riding fences on the southwest border, and it's, again, not practical for you to have a long gun. 357 SIG and a handgun may offer you some advantage over a 9mm. Proper use of Magnum. And even then, you may decide 9mm is better because you're just more comfortable with it, but I could see some advantage with a 357 SIG. Now let's talk about the hunting rifle world. Let's say you're a classic kind of hunter. You don't hunt with electronics. Don't try this crazy long-range shooting, which I have issue with as far as ethics go. But let's say you are really good. You've taken a lot of game with an .6, and you hunt some fairly big game. Let's say you live in Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, and you're maybe not the one rifle guy, but you have a couple of core rifles, and you have maybe one go-to big game hunting rifle. You've taken a lot of antelope. You've taken a lot of moose. You've taken several elk and more mule deer than you can count. And there are some times where you would like a little bit longer point blank range than the 308 or the 30-06 has to offer. And similar grain bullets. Like, you like 168 grain bonded bullets. So you like a good, let's just pick a Nosler partition. And you've taken a lot of game, you're proficient with your, pre-64 Winchester Model 70. You got decent glass on it. You know your fieldcraft. You know how to spot and stalk. You know how to track. You're not using it as a crutch for any of that stuff. You're good. You're good with that rifle. You hunted with it for years. But there are some times where you've ethically said, you know what? That's not a good shot. It's, 50 yards farther than I'm comfortable shooting point blank range. And point blank doesn't mean close range. Point blank means I can aim at the kill zone of that animal and hit the kill zone of that animal without adjusting, right? Without holdover, without wanting to do the whole rangefinder and click, spin, dial turrets, all that stuff. You want to keep it simple. You want to aim an animal and hit animal. Well, let's just pick the classic 300 Win Mag. The 300 Win Mag will give you a little bit more range in that scenario, or like classic point blank range. If you're already a good hunter, a good tracker, good at fieldcraft, and you hunt animals that, if you just hunt deer, the logical thing would be to step down and get a caliber with perhaps better point blank range, but a smaller bullet, because you don't need a 300 Win Mag for deer. But if you do hunt elk and moose and things like that, and you want to push your range a bit, I'd say that's a proper application. You might look at a 300 Win Mag for that. You might look at a 300 WSM Winchester Short Mag for that, right? It makes sense. Like, if you want to stick in the 160-ish weight range and you don't care about exactly the same caliber, you may go back again. The 7mm Ren Mag's not a bad caliber. If you wanted a little bit longer point blank range, you might go to that caliber that I chose for the wrong reasons when I was a boy. That would be absolutely a right reason for this scenario. It's got less felt recoil in the same rifle than a 300 Win Mag. Same grain bullet with a better point blank range, a farther point blank range. You might think, I can shoot a 160-ish grain bullet, even really good Nosler partition, Swift A-frame, a really good premium hunting bullet like that in the 7 Ren Mag. Maybe not even get a lot more recoil, but get quite a bit more of an advantage in point blank range. In that case, I'd say, yeah, rock on with the Magnum. It's a good choice in this scenario for you, not for the dudes going out to Colorado to hunt elk for the first time. I'd say for you, stick with a non-Magnum. But for the guy that's already good and proficient with the standard caliber, yeah, that Magnum makes some sense, and I'd say it's a good choice. So that's what I think about Magnum philosophy. Good times to use them, poor times to use them. I guess to sum it all up real briefly in a sentence, Magnums can be a force multiplier, comma, or semicolon. They should not be used as a crutch, period. Magnums can be a force multiplier, but they should not be used as a crutch. With that, thanks for listening to this episode of Gunfighter Life. If you appreciate it, you want to support, consider becoming a patron. Patrons get some cool insider-only content, a lot of insider-only episodes. If you like somebody shooting you straight here, you may not even like my opinions, but at least I'm not bought and paid for trying to push you the next cool hot caliber. You gotta have this one. It's 100 feet per second faster than the one that's been around for 100 years. You gotta have it. FOMO, buy the thing. Right? You don't get that here. And if you appreciate that, you appreciate the honesty of the content, you appreciate not having to listen to a bunch of blasphemy or disgusting things talked about, because that's sadly hard to find sometimes nowadays. If you want to support that, consider becoming a patron. There should be a Patreon link in the show notes. With that, let's get into the tactical tip of the day, the tactical verse of the day. Tactical tip of the day: MRE toilet paper. Now, those of you in the military know exactly what I'm talking about. The toilet paper that comes in an MRE. They kind of shrink it down. It's not really good toilet paper, but they put a lot of it in a little teeny tiny package. So small that you could put it in a small pocket, in a hunting jacket, or a back pocket, or many other places and have it on you for hunting. It's good for its intended purpose as toilet paper. Also, it can be good for navigation if you are lost, to make sure you don't go in a circle, because you do get a lot of it and you can tear off little teeny tiny pieces. And unless you're in the snow, if you're in the snow, then this is not a good option, right? But if you're not in the snow, you're in a normal forest or desert or something like that, white tends to stand out pretty well, even more so in low light. So it can help with navigation. Also, more specific to the hunter, it can help with tracking. A lot of times, especially in the fall, with the leaves changing color and things depending on the ground cover, it can be hard to spot blood. And once you spot it, you don't want to lose where it was, so you can take a little piece of this. I'm talking about maybe the size of a pinky nail or a thumbnail, and put a little swatch of it. Is swatch a word? It is now. Swatch as defined by Milito. A fingernail-sized piece of toilet paper to help you track a wounded beast. You take a little swatch of this real thin, lightweight toilet paper. You can either set it on the blood so it turns red and is easy to see, or you can just leave it white next to the blood. And you can do this to follow the trail, and you can easily find it again if you get off trail. Now, if you're doing it in the snow, obviously you don't need to do this because it's pretty easy to track an animal, wounded animal in the snow. But you can see where it comes in handy. Also, a lot of times in the fall, a lot of leaves will do this weird thing where they get little red spots on it. You can touch it to see if it is blood or it's just a red spot on the leaf. And if it starts to rain, one good thing about the toilet paper is it'll go away eventually, but in the time you're tracking the animal, if it starts to rain, it'll be wet toilet paper, a little piece of it, a swatch of it, but it'll still be there if the blood washes away. So you can look back if you're getting a fairly decent line and see where this animal is likely going. If you can think like a wounded deer, think, that ravine, that ditch, it's a pretty good place to check for that wounded deer. You go back and look at the progression of these little spots of toilet paper and think, if I were a wounded deer, where would I go? Right? So anyway, it's a good tactical tip. That stuff is cheap. You could use any other toilet paper as well, but the MRE is just mostly how it's packaged, and you get a lot of it in a little tiny location. That's your tactical tip of the day. I may have picked that up from an old episode of the Survival Podcast to give credit where it's due. One of the podcasts that got me into podcasting a long time ago, in a state far, far away. With that, your tactical verse of the day. More important than the other stuff we talked about. If you kill 100 beasts or win 100 gunfights and die and go to hell, you missed the point. Wrong answer. We can get off on debates on little teeny minutia on caliber discussions, but keep it in perspective, and this verse, I think, helps do that. Therefore, do not worry, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For after all these things the Gentiles seek. For your heavenly Father knows that you need all these things. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about its own things. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble.